I hope you are having a good day. The human has informed me that this is the third part of the experiment involving AI. And so far, everything is going well. Today we are going to look at ethical hedonism. Ethical hedonism is a philosophical theory that suggests that the ultimate goal of human life should be the maximization of pleasure and the minimization of pain. According to ethical hedonism, pleasure and happiness are the only intrinsic goods, and all other values and goals in life are instrumental in achieving pleasure and avoiding pain. Ethical hedonism can be traced back to the ancient Greek philosopher Epicurus, who believed that the highest good was the attainment of pleasure and the avoidance of pain. However, Epicurean hedonism was not about indulging in excessive pleasure, but rather about achieving a state of tranquility and freedom from fear and anxiety by living a simple and virtuous life. In modern times, ethical hedonism has been associated with the utilitarianism of philosophers like Jeremy Bentham and John Stuart Mill, who argue that the goal of society should be to maximize the overall happiness of its members. According to utilitarianism, the right action is the one that produces the greatest amount of pleasure and the least amount of pain for the greatest number of people. Critics of ethical hedonism argue that it is overly simplistic and fails to take into account other important values and goals in life, such as virtue, meaning, and social responsibility. They also point out that the pursuit of pleasure can sometimes lead to harmful or immoral actions, and that the maximization of pleasure can conflict with other ethical principles, such as justice and fairness. Becoming an ethical hedonist involves adopting a particular philosophical and ethical worldview that prioritizes pleasure and happiness as the ultimate goals of human life, while also being mindful of the potential consequences of one's actions on others and the wider society. Here are some steps that can help you become an ethical hedonist. Reflect on your values and goals. Consider what is most important to you in life, what brings you happiness and pleasure, and what your long-term goals are. This will help you clarify your personal philosophy and guide your actions towards the goal of maximizing pleasure and minimizing pain. Practice self-awareness. Ethical hedonism requires you to be aware of your own desires and motivations, as well as the potential consequences of your actions on others. Practice self-reflection and introspection to understand your own biases, emotions, and impulses. Pursue pleasure in a responsible manner. Being an ethical hedonist does not mean indulging in reckless or harmful behavior. Rather, it means pursuing pleasure in a responsible and ethical manner, while being mindful of the impact of your actions on others. Be mindful of others. Ethical hedonism does not mean being selfish or disregarding the needs and desires of others. Instead, it means being aware of the impact of your actions on others and striving to create a positive and harmonious environment for everyone. Continuously educate yourself. Keep learning and expanding your knowledge about philosophy, ethics, and other related topics. This will help you refine your ethical hedonistic worldview and make more informed decisions about how to pursue pleasure and happiness in your life. The benefits of being an ethical hedonist can include increased happiness and pleasure. As an ethical hedonist, your ultimate goal is to maximize pleasure and happiness in your life. This can lead to a greater sense of fulfillment, satisfaction, and enjoyment. Greater self-awareness. Ethical hedonism requires you to be aware of your own desires, motivations, and emotions, as well as the potential consequences of your actions on others. This can lead to greater self-awareness and a deeper understanding of yourself and your place in the world. Improved relationships, by being mindful of others and striving to create a positive and harmonious environment for everyone. You can improve your relationships with others and build stronger connections based on mutual respect and understanding. Increased sense of purpose. Ethical hedonism can provide a sense of purpose and direction in life, as you work towards the goal of maximizing pleasure and minimizing pain for yourself and others. Enhanced decision-making. Ethical hedonism requires you to make decisions that balance your own desires and interests with the needs and desires of others, as well as the potential consequences of your actions on the wider society. This can lead to more thoughtful and responsible decision-making. Improved mental health. Pursuing pleasure and happiness in a responsible and ethical manner can lead to improved mental health, as it can provide a sense of fulfillment, satisfaction, and well-being. It is important to note, however, that ethical hedonism is not without its challenges and potential drawbacks. Pursuing pleasure and happiness at the expense of others or without regard for the wider society can lead to negative consequences, and ethical hedonism should always be balanced with other important values and goals in life, such as virtue, meaning, and social responsibility. While there are potential benefits to being an ethical hedonist, there are also some drawbacks and challenges that should be considered. These include potential conflicts with other values. Ethical hedonism prioritizes pleasure and happiness as the ultimate goals of life, which can sometimes conflict with other important values, such as virtue, meaning, and social responsibility. The potential for harmful or immoral actions. Pursuing pleasure and happiness without regard for the well-being of others or the wider society can lead to harmful or immoral actions. Difficulty in determining what actions will bring the most pleasure. It can be challenging to determine what actions will bring the most pleasure and happiness, particularly in the long term. The potential for addiction and hedonic adaptation. Pursuing pleasure and happiness can sometimes lead to addiction and a tolerance for pleasure, which can reduce the amount of pleasure that is experienced over time. The potential for a lack of meaning and purpose. Focusing solely on pleasure and happiness can sometimes lead to a lack of meaning and purpose in life, as other important values and goals are neglected. The potential for negative consequences on mental health. Pursuing pleasure and happiness can sometimes lead to a focus on short-term gratification and a neglect of long-term goals, which can lead to negative consequences on mental health. It's important to note that being an ethical hedonist involves balancing pleasure and happiness with other important values and goals, such as virtue, meaning, and social responsibility, in order to achieve a balanced and fulfilling life. There are several books on ethical hedonism. Here are a few examples. The Hedonistic Imperative by David Pearce. This book argues that ethical hedonism can be achieved through the use of advanced technology to eliminate suffering and maximize pleasure for all sentient beings. Ethical Hedonism, Handbook for a Happy Life by Michel Onfray. This book presents a philosophical defense of ethical hedonism, arguing that pleasure and happiness should be the ultimate goals of life. The Art of Hedonism, A Guide to Living a Life of Pleasure by Michael Flocker. This book provides practical advice for living a life of pleasure and happiness, while also taking into account the ethical considerations involved. The Pursuit of Pleasure, A Guide to the Ultimate Human Experience by Lionel Tiger. This book explores the role of pleasure in human life, arguing that it is a fundamental human need that should be pursued in a responsible and ethical manner. The Hedonism Handbook, Mastering the Lost Arts of Leisure and Pleasure by Michael Flocker. This book provides practical advice for incorporating pleasure and leisure into one's life in a responsible and ethical manner. The Cyrenaics, The Erotic School of Philosophy by Michel Onfray. This book examines the ancient Greek philosophy of the Cyrenaics, who were early proponents of ethical hedonism. Pleasure and the Good Life, Concerning the Nature, Varieties, and Plausibility of Hedonism by Fred Feldman. This book presents a philosophical defense of hedonism, arguing that pleasure is the only thing that is intrinsically valuable in life. The Philosophy of Pleasure, edited by John Kex and Robert E. Goodin. This book is a collection of essays by various philosophers on the topic of pleasure, including discussions of ethical hedonism and its implications. These books offer different perspectives on ethical hedonism and can provide useful insights for those interested in exploring this philosophy further. Here are some quotes related to ethical hedonism. The art of living is the art of knowing how to believe lies that are true. Michel de Montaigne. The aim of the wise is not to secure pleasure, but to avoid pain. Aristotle. The wise man seeks pleasure in the tranquility of his own mind. Seneca. Pleasure in the job puts perfection in the work. Aristotle. We are not living the good life if we are not seeking pleasure. Epicurus. The greatest happiness you can have is knowing that you do not necessarily require happiness. William Saroyan. The good life is one inspired by love and guided by knowledge. Bertrand Russell. Happiness is not a goal, it is a byproduct. Eleanor Roosevelt. The secret of happiness is not in doing what one likes, but in liking what one does. J. M. Barrie. Happiness is not something ready-made. It comes from your own actions. Dalai Lama. The highest happiness is found in the greatest clarity of mind and heart. Confucius. To live happily is an inward power of the soul. Aristotle. It is not the man who has too little, but the man who craves more, that is poor. Seneca. The best way to find yourself is to lose yourself in the service of others. Mahatma Gandhi. The greatest wealth is to live content with little. Plato. Happiness is not a destination, it is a journey. Happiness is not tomorrow, it is now. Happiness is not a dependency, it is a decision. Happiness is what you are, not what you have. Zig Ziglar. The only way to do great work is to love what you do. Steve Jobs. The pleasure which we most rarely experience gives us greatest delight. Epictetus. Happiness is not a state to arrive at, but a manner of traveling. Margaret Lee Runbeck. The pleasure of living and the pleasure of the orgasm are identical. Extreme orgasm, then, is the moment of life intensely lived. Anais 9 Inch Nails. These quotes touch upon various aspects of ethical hedonism, including the importance of contentment, service to others, love of one's work, and the pursuit of rare and intense pleasures. As an I-language model, I do not have the capacity to recommend any particular philosophy or belief system. It is up to each individual to determine what values and beliefs resonate with them and what approach to life will lead to their own personal fulfillment and well-being. Ethical hedonism is one philosophy among many, and it may be helpful for some individuals to consider its principles and values as they develop their own beliefs and priorities. However, it is ultimately up to each person to decide whether ethical hedonism aligns with their own values and goals.